else could use structure and guidance?
This show?
This show. Let's move on to
drama.
Guys, it's
time for DougDoug to call out Mark Rober.
Yeah, you need to do it. We need first of all, we need an enemy for this podcast.
Yeah.
All good podcasts have enemies.
Did you know that if you go to x.com, the everything app, and you submit the winning college basketball bracket for March Madness, you could win a trip to Mars? This is a real thing that's on Twitter. And so what I'm thinking is, because we have a big audience now, if every one of our viewers, we all submit a different bracket, but we put Atrioc's name, then one of us will win, and then Elon will kidnap him and send him to Mars, and we'll finally be rid of you.
Is that what you're thinking? Because
Wow.
you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking after our episode last week where you defended Elon Musk, he reached out and hired you as an ad man to promote his various...
He's like, don't worry, whatever is submitted, he will win the contest.
I do like that it says win a free trip to Mars, but then after that, best bracket wins 100K. Kind of, is it, so do you get both, or does it imply that if you put together the best...
Are you going to show up to Mars with no money? You're going to be broke?
I would hate to be broke.
No, he puts it on Mars.
Yeah, you have to get there.
Ready Player One. That's where he leaves his inheritance on Mars, and then the rest of humanity has to go get it.
He's been weirdly quiet about Mars. Have you noticed in the past few years? Because he kind of, you know, the
Used to
whole
be
thing
the
with him
Mars
blowing
guy.
past Tesla deadlines? Used to be blowing past the Mars deadline.
Yeah.
And we'd be like, we're going to Mars this year. We're going to Mars this year.
He did say something.
And we've left
I
it
think
behind.
today. He said Mars in 20 years, maybe 30. That's what I'm not kidding.
He said it was like 5 years.
No,
That's
4
what he
years ago.
said.
Like 4 years ago.
Finally, a realistic timeline. I was talking, we have this Discord now that we started the show, and I think I put in that chat, I was like, as much as an Elon hater as I am, part of me gets excited every time he drops the Mars deadline.
Oh, dude, I mean, the Mars would be sick.
I want that to happen in my lifetime.
It would be sick to go.
You like, no matter how much you hate Elon, like you got to admit that when the Starship caught with the 2 chopsticks and the spaceship
was sick.
landed,
It was awesome.
Cinema, right?
Yeah, it was cinema.
So good.
I mean, the win-win would be if Elon goes to Mars. Then I get my
Finally.
dream and he's farther
Yes.
away from me.
God, Elon and Atrioc and Mars together.
You two chopping it
A
up.
buddy
with-
cop film where we have to learn to get
Yeah.
along?
And you have 100K in your pocket.
Because I won the March Madness bracket.
telling your kids, I showed up Mars, only 100K in my pocket. Turns out you couldn't buy anything with it.
And I built this future for us.
I do have a few topics I want to list for the audience before we
I don't
get
want to hear
into
it.
them.
I don't want to hear it. Stop.
You don't
Pause.
even want to.
No, before you tell me these topics,
What?
this is a nice thing that I'm doing. I need to do a nice thing for you, okay?
Oh.
I need to do a nice thing for you. And that nice thing is that we need to talk about safe spaces.
I think
Actually, yeah, I think Perry has this thing.
we
Perry,
need
if you
to
can pull
talk
this up.
about how you need to use an iPad.
Okay.
You need to figure out how to use iPads.
This is the hostility. You're bringing that over from the other podcast. Now, if you guys don't know at home, Aiden is also part of another podcast called The Yard. Okay, I'm happy to say their name. And they bully him a lot. And I didn't notice this, but they pointed this out. I don't know if you could pull up the tweet from, let's watch this. Let's watch this real quick. This is what they showed
I
us.
use Google Translate to talk to my Uber driver. I know.
Okay, freeze frame right there. He says, I use Google Translate like my Uber driver, and then pauses like a dog that's about to be beaten. Because they make fun of him so much for just talking to Uber drivers on that podcast.
They make fun of me for talking to people, period. So I was just like, instinctively, I was like, yep, let it hit. And then you guys just didn't say anything.
Look at his face. He's afraid. You don't have to be afraid here, is what I'm trying to tell you.
This is a safe space?
This is a safe space.
Oh.
You can tell me the topics.
And
I'm
now
not
I can
gonna-
tell you the
yes,
topics?
You can tell me the topics. I just want you to know, like, it's okay.
I'm excited to tell you the
All
topics.
right.
Well, everyone, this week we're talking about how is everyone getting stupider?
Yeah, you would talk about that, you bitch.
Hey, yo, dude.
Bro.
Dumbass.
We
Dumbass.
just talked about safe spaces, so we'd like this to be
That
one.
was the first 2
We're in, and then
episodes.
This is getting-
We're warmed
I
up.
was
Nah,
really-
shit's getting real
I was
now.
really settling into my safe space. So, and also the fallout of Mark Rober's suspiciously timed video.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like he listened to our ep and
I
then
do
kind of
think.
just pumped
I
that
think he
out.
stole your content and just,
Potentially.
yeah.
And some drama that's been going on in the wake of that. And then also in this era of protectionism in the US, I wanted to bring up a little law called the Jones Act, which is really interesting just to help demonstrate some of the costs of enacting, even good intentions behind protectionist legislation, talking about something that isn't tariffs for once in the context of protectionism too. And Also, we want to do some follow-ups on comments and people's feedback from the last couple episodes. We're going to squeeze that in too.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. About the Jones Act is really funny because you guys were talking before the pod started about how, like, isn't it crazy how things like that are so effective and then some people don't even know what it's about? And I was like, I have no fucking I have no idea. So I will be the voice of the people on this one trying to learn about the Jones Act from you. I haven't heard about this.
But I think you wanted to intro, right? Your topic was the
I
first
do.
one
I
we
want
had
to
kind
call you stupid. And I want to call you stupid. And I want to call Perry stupid. And I want to call myself stupid.
It was a safe space for like maybe 15 seconds, by the way.
All right, so before you do that, why don't you spend 30 minutes pulling up a tweet to call us
I don't
stupid?
need to do that. Okay, we've got it.
Can you find a tweet that calls us stupid
I
in
have
under an
found
hour?
better than that.
Okay.
A Financial Times article asking, have humans passed peak brain power? That's sort of the opening topic here I want to talk about is, well, let me ask you a sincere question first. And I'm going to ask Aiden first because I have a specific example. Do you think you're smarter or dumber than you were when you made this video in 2012?
Master Cabin 45 here.
Do you think you're
Just
smarter?
saying
Be
thank you
honest.
for getting
Then when you made
past
this video, are you
100
smarter or
subscribers.
dumber?
I know it's a little mark, but I'm really happy.
On the whole,
and
I'm
you guys-
smarter, but it's closer than I'd like to admit.
Okay, so that's sort of the theory here is that beginning in 2012, adults and teenagers have reported marked declines in their ability on math and reading scores and their general ability to concentrate. Difficulty thinking or concentrating, difficulty, trouble learning new things.
Wait,
Around
what?
2012 is when it like starts to decline, and it's been measurably rising or declining in this case ever since.
Wait, so up until
Science, reading, maths, numeracy, literacy.
what is a little surprising to me
Yeah.
is up until 2012, you're saying that it was still trending upwards
It was
on the
trending
whole, or it
upwards.
was like stagnant and then it dropped. Like, do you know?
I don't have the data. I mean, it looks like 2006, 2012 is pretty flat.
Yeah.
So I would say the 2000s that we peaked, but like it's been rising, flattened out, and now it is declining as of 2012. And, you know, that's, I think, I mean, do you have any thought? Like, Doug, what's your first thought when I...
First thought, I think you and I graduated around 2012. We hit the peak, baby.
That's why we're smart.
Let's fucking go, dude.
Truly representative of the cognitive decline.
I mean, I've thought so. I talked to a teacher friend of mine about like kids and what's been going on. I think as we talk about it, probably need to separate COVID. My friend who's a high school teacher was saying right now, the way he phrased it, the last wave of kids who are really messed up by COVID are finally like starting to leave the school system.
They got rid of them.
Yeah, but like they are so messed up, and the way he phrased it was like these are kids who justifiably have no sense of authority when it comes to like schooling or teaching or parents or anything, because there's this 2-year period where they were just at home and could do whatever they wanted. And he said, as a teacher, there was no way to discipline anybody or stop them from just playing Minecraft all day long.
Right.
And so the structures that we were told as a kid of you have to listen to your parents and go to school and do these things just completely collapsed. And so he said they're like kind of getting used to it again. And like people, you know, the younger kids who were younger during COVID are now sort of like back into like the way our education,
rhythm.
Yeah.
right, of the rhythm of how we have traditionally done things. So it sounds like that has really messed things up. And then for me, there's a broader question of like, is it a good thing that our school system is dramatically changing? Because my sense from this article is less that people are dumber and more that people are not doing well on our traditional way of grading intelligence.
Well, I wanted to dig in.
Yeah.
What is is there more information here about like the context of why this is happening or how this is measured? Like what is the rest of the article?
Nobody has an exact answer on why, but they posit some couple things. One is that people are reading less than ever. So the decline of reading is pretty dramatic. Again, right around 2010, 2012. And I want to say 2010 is the year that smartphones took over 50% of the population. So once you say phones bad, everyone loses their mind. But that is like the obvious conclusion they're leaning towards.
You think phones are good? You get to be the villain this
Are
episode.
you a phones good guy?
No,
Yes.
He's the
I
phones
was going
good guy.
phones bad. I'm
Aiden said
phones
he
bad
thinks
guy.
phones are good for
No.
kids in the comments.
No, I want to be
got
phones
him.
bad.
So phones, and generally it says like our ability to, it's not like reading is getting specifically worse or math specifically worse. It's that our ability to process information, like take in information, process it, and make, it's almost like when your brain turns on and has to work a little bit, we've sort of pushed past that. And they point to a lot of things. One of them they say is not even that it's phones, but it's infinite scrolling on media
Yes.
to where it kind of like anytime you get in discomfort, you just move on to the next thing. Like your brain does not get comfortable sitting in the discomfort of thought. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Could I posit my?
Yeah.
I'll give
What's
my
Aiden's theory on intelligence?
anecdotal theory on this, because this is something that I've thought a lot about. Self-reflecting. I feel dumber in some ways than I used to be when I was younger, actually.
Okay.
And the biggest thing that I noticed was as I've gotten older, my ability to speak in the way I want and instantly come to the words and ways I want to describe things and explain things has gotten less sharp over time, particularly in, I would say, the last like 5 to 6 years. I feel like I was actually better at finding the words to explain things and speak to people when I was younger. And I think that tracks really directly in my mind with the amount that I read. Because I barely have read up until this year. So maybe before this year, I had not read a whole book in maybe 5 or 6 years. And my habit of reading like every day obsessively has been gone since basically the beginning or middle of high school. And I think reading in general, or maybe if you intently listen to audiobooks, I think there is some scientific
I've heard that too.
support for listening to audiobooks actually is very similar to reading. I think the problem is, are you actually paying attention to what you're listening to in the same way that you have to pay attention when reading? If that
Right.
makes
Like
sense.
I've seen Ludwig listen to an audiobook and it's not.
Yeah.
His eyes are
you can
glazed over.
You can just you can just phase out while something happens to be on, right? But if you are intently listening to audiobooks, I think it might be the same. And I think that is the number one thing I could point to in my own life is when I was reading every day, I think I had a way better vocabulary and quickness in the way that I was able to like access and explain things. But that aside, my other part of this that I think absolutely has to do with this is it is related to phones, and phones are like the way this problem is dispersed in my mind. But the constant like activation you have access to all the time by scrolling things like TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, anything, or just the internet in general. Or for me, it's YouTube. Like I listen to a ton of YouTube and podcasts, and how I have to listen to those things almost all the time. I always am putting something on. And I think when you're pushing your brain like constantly, and you're constantly giving it, it's constantly in a state of stimulation, I think things that stand out are fewer and far between, and things become harder to retain and memorize. Like a lot of the way that you memorize or like hang on to things is strong emotional like responses to those things. So if say I did something wrong, like I betrayed you in some capacity, and there's two versions of this playing out. The version where you don't realize anything happened and we never talk about it.
Admitting something.
And I've hidden it from you for years and you don't really know about it.
My
That
bank accounts
version,
are drained.
Every day your life is worse, and I'm watching you. I'm watching you suffer, and you have no idea it was me. It was me.
This whole time.
but there's some big lesson, like there might be something that I have to like learn from that or take away from that. That I might not take away because there's no big emotional moment that forces me to confront it. But if you got mad at me and we got into an argument, like a real argument, which we've never really done before,
we will.
it would be very distinct and fresh in your mind. Like that's something that heavily influences memory. Is like the emotional, maybe the emotional state. I'm sure there are better ways to describe this, but basically the state of being that you're in when you're consuming the information. But if you're in like a constant baseline state of information being spit at you all the time, and there's nothing to differentiate it from every other moment of your day, it's really hard to actually remember and retain it. And I've been talking about this a lot with some other friends because I think my memory has gotten worse. And I was like, I don't think I have like early onset dementia or something like that. I hope. I think it's just a consequence of the way that I am constantly engaging in messages, consuming media. Like it's a consequence of my phone.
Do you feel this
my
way,
job,
Doug?
all these things.
Is this something that you've experienced, or what's your experience with this over the past, let's say, since 2012 to now, post phones, post?
I'm too weird of a person, I think, to have a baseline that I can compare against. I think this is a relevant enough time to bring up this tweet I saw.
Okay.
So this is a teacher who talked about the current state of education and essentially saying what you are saying, Aiden, so we can start it.
That's the old
I think
CEO of
that you
Twitch.
guys don't know what's going on in education right now. That's fine. Like, how could you know unless you were working in it? But I think you need to know. So here's exactly what it's like right now working in public education. First of all, the kids have no ability to be bored whatsoever. They live on their phones and they're just fed a constant stream of dopamine from the minute their eyes wake up in the morning until they go to sleep at night. Because they're in a constant state of dopamine withdrawal at school, they behave like addicts. They're super emotional, like the smallest thing sets them off. And when you are standing in front of them trying to teach, they're vacant. They have no ability to tune in if your communication isn't packaged in short little clips or if it doesn't have like bright flashing lights. That's actually the way harder part for me than just the outright behaviors, is just being up at the front, talking to a group of kids who have their eyes open, they're looking at me, but they're not there.
Yeah, and that's the core of it, right? Which is
wild,
pretty damning, and sounds horrible.
That's
and so
wild.
Then the response, which I think is interesting. So I saw this response from Emmett Shear, the old CEO of Twitch, and he said, "I'm not sure if this is true, but weirdly, if it is, which is a just awesome opener."
By the way, wait, one Emmett Shear thing. I used to work with this guy. He would be in meetings where executives are presenting him important things they've worked a whole month on, and he's on his phone playing Hearthstone. This is a fact I will stand. So for him to call out,
he was breaking out of the psychic prison.
All right, tell me, I'm sorry.
That's so
yeah.
funny.
So in response to this teacher explaining how difficult education is right now, he says, "I'm not sure if this is true, but weirdly, if it is, it kind of gives me hope. Blur out the judgment and details, and it sounds like a generation staging a jailbreak from psychic prison." So there is an argument that I don't necessarily agree with, that the way our schools and the way our everything has been structured education-wise is very much about turning the average citizen into a cog, into a broad cog that can fit into any machine. And I think arguably that is not a good system for majority of people, particularly in our modern society, and that maybe it is a world where we want to have more specialized tools of AI education or tutors or whatever that aren't just like, we're going to jam you into this box, check all the boxes over the course of high school. Emmett's take is a bit, I don't know, psychic prison feels like a bit much.
I feel like that's a little extreme. I think maybe the less extreme version of the argument that you're saying, I actually think that makes sense. I think the argument of like making school more specialized and allowing kids to like focus on particular areas that they're best suited for or they're most likely to succeed in is an approach that not only like some schools are able to take in the US, but like if you look at education systems in other countries, they often let kids do that, like in the later high school years especially, right? I think that is a very disconnected from the consequences of kids having phones.
There's two paths, right? There's one of just saying that schooling needs an overhaul in general, which has been true for a while, which is like a lot of kids get left in the cracks. A lot of kids aren't set for this rote memorization learning thing. It's not physical enough for young boys. I've heard like they don't get enough outside time, especially that's why like there's like aspects of schooling that could be.
But if we were having this argument about education in 2007 before iPhones existed, that argument would be the same.
It's the same.
It was the same thing back then.
But also there's the dopamine addiction, which is like, it seems different.
And I'll say, as somebody who, so I didn't know this. I got an ADHD diagnosis like a year ago. And I'm not about to blame like all of the bad things in my life on ADHD, to preface. But
publicly, you do it privately, but not.
But when I talked to my parents, I didn't know that they knew I had ADHD as a kid. And
Did you not see that video? It's obvious. I'm
pretty sure everyone. Safe space. What the fuck happened to the safe space?
All right, sorry.
And talking to them, like I think about when I was a kid and I wasn't allowed to like watch TV on weekdays. I wasn't allowed to play video games on weekdays. I could read basically. And that constant, like part of having ADHD, I think is your constant seek for stimulation basically. And it is hard to focus on things. And for me as a kid, that ended up getting like captured in books and comic books. Like I just read constantly. I would take a book everywhere with me as a child so I could read every moment of every day. Or I would listen to audiobooks on tape and things like that. And I think I think about what would have happened if I had like a phone instead and just free reign on the internet, which I didn't really have until like mid-teenage years. And I think it would have been really, really bad for me. I would have turned out way, way differently because my effort and focus and like success would have been like completely diverted from like how I grew up. Obviously, that's extremely anecdotal. This is like a very personal experience to me, right? But I do think on the whole, access to like this all the time, like when you give, like I think a really good video on the effects of weed came out because a bunch of like weed research has dropped in the last couple years, like post legalization, and a lot of the consequences of weed can now be looked at in like the long run. And turns out there is really, really bad cognitive effects from like constant or like even small use of like weed, particularly for children. Like it not so much for adults. I'm not here to like say like stop smoking weed or something.
He's
but
in the seat.
I think
this seat is the villain.
Yeah, that's the villain seat for sure.
I'm saying the idea that having this device with you all the time that is constantly like pushing and stimulating your brain and giving that to someone who's like young and developing, especially, the idea that it has no consequence at all is ridiculous for one. Like it would be crazy to have an opinion that it has no impact at all.
You want to take away people's phones and their weed.
Yeah, no phones, no weed, Aiden.
Honestly, if they're under 18, maybe. I don't know if I'd take
I
it
don't
away.
think-
I don't know if I'd be
jokes aside,
taking it away.
Yeah, I wouldn't have learned anything in high school. Already had a hard enough time paying attention with like
100%.
being able to watch
It was so
TV
hard
at
for
night
me.
and like having a GameCube at home, let alone fucking Fortnite on my phone and clips. Like I would be destroyed. I completely agree.
100%. And they have data on this. So I'm not remembering the study exactly, but they've done studies on schools that have effectively, again, a lot of schools try it, but not effectively, but effectively banned phones.
And it helps.
And when they do, it helps. Scores go up.
I just want to point out for the audio listeners,
I got a call
Brandon
from
just got a
telemarketing.
call in the middle of that sentence and had to put his phone down on his lap. Go ahead.
Sorry, can I play a quick game of Fruit Ninja? Because I'm getting bored.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm getting fucking bored.
In the middle of the sentence, reached out for his phone and looked down away from us.
I even talked about this. I talked about a similar thing recently on, we do a little advice show for the Yard, like Patreon. And we were talking about vices. And I think a huge thing for me was how compulsively, literally addicted I was to Twitter for years. Compulsive motion of opening the app, scrolling.
You close it, open
without
it again.
thinking.
Yeah.
Close it, literally open it like a second later, doing that all the time. And I think that's what kids have access to. And this story from this woman online, right? That's not a study, but I have heard this story so much from so many people who teach that phones have like destroyed the classroom. And if we were to go back to what I think is a valid argument, actually, which is what Doug was bringing up at the beginning, I think that is, again, totally true. Like ways to transform and shape education to make people be as successful as possible and escape the psychic prison, if you will. I think that's totally valid. It's just
to talk about.
separate from phone
so
time.
I can lead into your things real quick. I want to say something. So in that article, you don't have to bring it up. I'll just say it ends by saying, because this all started around 2012, it's very obviously not an evolution. We're not getting physically dumber. Our brains are not cognitively dumber. So it is having to do with like the way we're learning, the way our environment we're in, the way they access the phones. And it means it's changeable, which means, the hopeful thing of it is like, we can change it. Our policy or whatever we do can make it more likely. So you have this idea here from becoming an alpha. Is this Andrew Tate's school? Is this the solution?
Wait, is this Andrew Tate's Forbes sponsored school?
These are Alpha Tate's 3 commitments.
Okay, all right.
Tech bros, I'm sorry you had to wait a whole 25 minutes to
Before
talk
we
about AI, but we're back into AI, dude. All right, let's talk about how AI is going to make everything better, and there's literally no downside, right?
I can't think of any.
Okay, so I think there is an important premise to start with, which is that one-on-one tutoring of a student is shown to be vastly vastly more effective. And there's been a lot of studies by this. I found one from the University of Chicago. But the difference between having a teacher in front of a group of people who is giving the same lecture and the same broad lesson to everybody versus a one-on-one tutor is massive difference. And we all know this, right?
Yep,
That's
100%.
why rich people pay for tutors for their kids, and then it always makes them do way better in school, right? So if we agree with that premise, which has been around and known for decades and decades and decades, if we could transform our education system to be more like a one-on-one tutor experience, that could have incredible benefits for kids. So there are now studies going on with basically people using AI LLMs to have an AI tutor, essentially. So this is in early stages. These are going to get way better, but even there's some studies in Nigeria and Ghana. One of them is crazy. In Nigeria, they had students in a 6-week program. For 1 hour a day after school, they talked to this LLM chatbot to help them learn English. And they tested that at the end. The 6 weeks was equivalent to 2 years of typical learning. That is how big of a difference having a tailored experience was. They did math in Ghana. Kids were given an hour of this AI math tutor on WhatsApp. And over 8 months of doing this, 1 hour a day, it was an extra year of learning. Like, these are crazy gains when you can tailor education to a specific person. So Alpha School, I only found out about this recently. It's this school in the US. There's like 9 campuses, something like that. And there's some like prominent tech people whose like kids are in these things. Their premise for their school is there are 2 hours a day of actual schooling.
2 hours a day of don't be a beta. Learn how to not be
learn how to not be a beta.
Yeah, where
You crush a brew.
you sling dick. You smoke that marijuana. They know at Alpha School.
You don't know shit about weed, Aiden.
Look-
You're gonna smoke fucking.
No, my
Look
bad.
at
dankus
Lulu here,
herb.
10 years
bad
old.
idea.
She shows up every day. She
My
hits
bad
the
idea.
bong. She fucking goes.
so
She watches
sorry.
the LeBron
She's a fucking
videos.
alpha, and you don't get
You're
that.
right.
You don't
You're
get
right.
that.
She's an alpha. So this school, their premise is you have 2 hours a day. That's it. Of really tailored learning. Their teachers are no longer considered teachers. They are guides. And their goal is to be these one-on-one mentors with each student, which are offering support and guidance and motivation for the student to work with this AI tutor to have really tailored education to them. And the testimonies from kids are like this one. I don't have to stick to just 2nd grade. I can learn at 3rd and 4th grade content too, right? Like, kids can go at their own rate for all these different topics. And then the rest of the day, they spend doing all of these whatever activities they're interested in. So they can like try to run their own business, or they do some sort of outdoor activity or pottery or whatever they feel like, whatever's going to make them the biggest alpha. So this is interesting. I only learned about this recently, but apparently the results of this are insane. Like the scoring that these kids are doing is vastly higher on average than a traditionally educated kid in the Texas region. And it's wild to think that like 2 hours, and I imagine myself in school and like how much of schooling was me just forcing myself through this slog. And if it was tailored to me, like now I learn at like 100 times the rate I used to because I tailor everything to my interests and largely use AI to help me do that. And I'm very optimistic about us potentially transforming education that is separate from phones, which I don't think kids should have in school.
So I want to say, I just want to say, I have used this a lot. I mean, I was doing it
go to
before,
Alpha
but
school?
No, I don't go. I'm actually not
You
in
went
Alpha.
to Alpha School?
I'm
Damn,
actually
bro.
in
What year
beta
did you
school.
graduate, bro?
I'm in beta school. It's different. I sadly talked
What's
to the.
it like once you broke out of the Matrix?
Oh, dude.
But you sort of put me onto this, and I've been doing it more, and it works. It legitimately. I'll put in an article that I want to talk about on stream. I'll have it summarize the whole thing, but not summarize it. I'll have it quiz me. So I'll like read the article, and then I'll put it in the thing, and I'm like, hey, just check my knowledge. And if you do the voice mode, like I have a conversation about the article, and if I'm like, this is my takeaway, they're like, well, actually, it'll like correct me, or like it's like a really smart person I'm talking to that knows what I'm trying to learn and just gives me feedback. I mean, I can actually see what you're talking about. I've tried it firsthand, and it does work.
Yep.
And that way, when I go live and someone asks me that question, I've had this, like I'm prepared for it in a way that I couldn't have done just by myself reading. Like it does, there is potential there.
The
100%.
rate at which
Like,
I've learned history, programming, a new language, like learning Japanese, are all easily 10 times the rate at which I used to learn things 10 years ago using AI
it's just
tools.
that, it's that feedback.
Yeah.
It is wild. And it's not just feedback, it's that it's custom tailored to you, right? Imagine a teacher who's explaining the article to you, but there's 30 people who all have their own questions, and you get
Yeah,
lost
it's like
in
what I'm lost on, I get an immediate answer.
right.
on.
And you can tailor it to you. I mean, imagine again, kids who are like my teacher friend was saying, like, kids don't seem to be as motivated nowadays. And what I would hope is that AI tools or whatever modern education tools we use, whether it's AI or not, can be tailored so this kid who's terrible at focusing on math it can be rephrased in some sort of game that's related to Fortnite or their favorite characters or a weird like movie thing in a way that actually gets their attention, right? At a level that matches their specific type of
their
learning.
skill level
Right,
and
right,
works
right.
up from there.
Have you, Doug, have you seen The Wire?
Yes.
Dude. Okay, I don't know if you know, Aiden can't go 15 minutes in real life without bringing up The Wire. He forces it into every conversation.
It's because it's a great
And
show.
we've made it 2 whole episodes, I thought, without this problem, and now it's back.
It's a
Now
great show.
Okay.
But you might remember, you've seen The Wire, have you not?
Yeah, I've seen The Wire.
You know the beginning
I've seen it through your description of every line.
the famous scene at the beginning of season 4 when Snoop is buying the nail gun in the store. And the whole thing is that like Snoop, you know, had Snoop grown up in maybe a better environment, is actually a very intelligent person who knows what they need, knows how to ask questions, and has like a very in-depth conversation of like how I specifically need this type of tool that would be best suited to hide the bodies in vacant buildings.
Yeah, they're buying anything to hide dead bodies. But
and I this is a silly example of I do think like catering like knowledge and learning to specific situations that best fit like the kids so that they best understand them is totally the way to go. Even like just having individual time is so important. Like I remember when I was a younger kid in like 5th grade, and I think there was a brief period of time where I went to a private school, and in that school there was like a subset of people within the class that they pulled out of class to like work on basically like the next grade's worth of material because we already knew the existing material. We were nerds.
Okay.
So, but at public schools, those opportunities were like few and far between, at least at US public schools, right? And like I said, when you look at public education in a lot of other countries, they start to take these more like refined approaches to different students so that they're working on something that they are more invested in. I think this is kind of awesome in that sense. Like
cool.
if you're doing this through in a classroom that is like deployed by the teacher or the school rather than like at the kids like phones at an individual level.
Right.
I think this is really cool because I think at least as if you took this all out of the world of like technology and you just go back far enough in time, I think again, these were the same conversations about education that people are having like 10, 20, 30 years ago about how to help students succeed. And this is like a tool that allows that to happen.
I want to talk a little about the negative sides of AI, though, and it's not this.
Yeah.
In education. And I've been hearing this all over. There's a good article about it, but also I've talked to I had my chat like come up and give some stories. And the level of cheating, especially in college level courses right now with ChatGPT is rampant.
Yes.
It is it is viral. I mean,
so you're saying they're breaking out of the psychic prison.
I mean, and maybe that means the whole system is just, it doesn't work in this era.
Right.
But like the structure of it is still there and it's teetering. It's not, teachers are frustrated. They're grading like 80% ChatGPT papers they know the student did put no time into. And the students are also reporting that like, okay, so let's say you're a student and you want to try hard. Well, you're worried that if you don't use AI to cheat, you're going to fall behind this kid that does.
If
and your grade's worse.
If you're in college, you're literally suffering because of the curve.
Right.
Yeah, there's a curve. And then also, like, you hear the stories of like people graduating. It's a tough time now to find, if you get bad grades, you're worried you're going to graduate and not be. So you're like almost incentivized hard to cheat because the thing can write better than you on a lot of things.
Right.
So now it's like this race to the bottom where everyone is cheating at all times. Like it's getting exponential. And now they're going into job interviews and they're cheating in those. Like they're having the AI auto listen to the job question and then just reading the. I mean, it's breaking the whole system. It's breaking like every way of measuring human ability and talent and that structure that existed before. And I don't have the answer, but like that is a downside of AI that's coming really quickly.
Yes.
Well, I think this is a longer term, strong, positive.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's my. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend like no. AI is straight up destroying our current education system, like straight up. And I think there's a world where we can go, okay, long term, this like things like this alpha school could be really positive. I have an education from one of the best computer science schools in the country and a computer science degree from it. And I think that education quality was pretty bad overall. And I am not heartbroken if the fairly shitty way of having us learn and test our learning knowledge, which had almost no correspondence to who went on to actually be successful and make an impact in the world. I'm not that heartbroken if that system fails. I'm not that heartbroken if Professor Brian Harvey can't fucking grade our scheme projects as well anymore. I don't
Brian
give
Harvey
a shit.
getting shade
Like,
12 years later.
Yeah. Well, no, he's got this famous video about not cheating. And he's right. Morally, like obviously morally, I'm not supportive of cheating or anything, but the current structure is fucked for sure. And I think what I hope and think is and will happen is that we can push it towards these really tailored experiences. But it's not, I don't like the paradigm of like, all the kids go to high school and then they take the SAT and that number is how smart you are. It's like that shit is going to end.
Yeah.
That's going to end. It's going to be you are specialized in certain things and you can pursue those things with a lot of like individual focus.
I think this actually comes back to the first episode when we were talking about AI in a way, but this is hitting education, I would say, sooner or more heavily than the way it's hitting the job market.
It's like a freight train.
Like it's the same issue when we were talking about how, well, what is the consequences of like AI on the future of the way we work, right? And the big consequence is like, well, AI is going to replace all these jobs, but if those people can't move to new jobs because AI is also capable of replacing those jobs, then there's this catastrophic effect on the way like society is structured right now.
Yeah.
But this is the same situation. It's like new tool is not like complementary to the way education is currently structured.
Or has been done for decades.
Yeah.
I mean, for a long time.
But the deconstruction is happening already. So I think the answer, like when I think about what I fucking learned in business school is basically nothing.
You went to business school?
Yeah.
Oh, dope. Okay.
I went to business school and I
Damn.
studied finance and I studied marketing.
Damn.
Based.
And almost nothing of what I learned is applicable or
business
helpful
school,
in my
really?
life. Except for, and all of the experience that I gained by being in university was I leveraged a lot of university resources to like start a business and run esports events.
Yeah, doing actual things is the only way to learn.
By like running that company, and I don't like regret going to college for those reasons. Like I did learn a lot through those ways, and there were exceptions in my classes where I learned about stuff that I thought was really interesting. But overall, like I didn't take that much away from it. And this like tailored
and also
education
now it's
experience,
more expensive.
Yeah.
For kids nowadays, it makes no sense. For the average young person going to college right now, it's like the price has only gone up.
Yeah.
The quality is going down. Everyone's cheating. Like the quality of your degree means less because there's so many false positives. People are cheating through it. So people don't even like it's this really tough time to be figuring out what the fuck to do. I mean, I don't envy people who are younger. People who are like 18 right now. It's like insane. I'm really learning more about it by talking to some of them. And it's like, I feel like in 10 years, maybe we figured some of this out and they're having good, but I feel like this window is so bad. This window sucks.
Yeah. I again don't want to downplay that.
Yeah.
This window
and they
sucks.
have
and
parents like telling them,
really
don't just do
hard.
this or what, like parents that don't understand how much it's changed. I don't know. It's just interesting, man.
I think this specific use case
this
is
is
really cool. Like to me, if this is like, I think about the language learning example you gave, like you have been learning Japanese. That's how Ludwig's been studying Japanese. And in the time that he said he's been using ChatGPT, it is from my outside perspective as somebody who knows like a little Japanese, like very little, from studying it in college is, oh, wow, he's improved a lot in the period of time that he's been using that instead. And I think there is really cool use cases of it. Because as somebody who's from that first episode, the AI scrutiner, if you will, I here to scrutinize. And like, I do think the cheating epidemic right now is terrible. Like the situation is literally devolving before us. I'm really excited about something like this.
Have you heard the Steve Jobs quote? This is a long time ago. It's like him talking about the future. And he's like, Alexander the Great learned everything he knew from Aristotle. Aristotle was like his private tutor. And he's like, one day we'll be able to put all of Aristotle's teachings into a computer and create a digital Aristotle that can be anyone's tutor. And I thought that was really, I mean, first of all, it's incredible foresight for 84 when he said it or whatever. But like, there is something to that of a kid having the compounding knowledge of the world privately for whatever, like, whatever you're interested in, if it's Japanese or whatever. Like that is cool. I do see that being a positive thing once it can get figured out, once society adapts to it in a way. But
yes. That's what I said in the first episode. New technology, it's destructive at first, and then you start getting the gains. And we are currently in the destruction phase, and it's going to be hard and scary and terrible. And again, to repeat myself, I am not saying the terrible stuff isn't happening or won't happen, but I just want and hope that people can also acknowledge how much good there is down the road. And then hopefully we try to maximize that, minimize downside. That's, yeah, but it's fucked right now for sure.
It's just tough. I mean,
It's
if
bad.
you're 18 or you're like,
No, it's
you had
bad.
high
Yeah.
school and COVID and now you're dealing with cheating in
Yeah,
college.
it's
like,
bad. It's bad.
Well,
You're just getting fucked.
I'm trying to reach
yeah.
for like what might be like what are more negatives, or like what is the potential argument to this use case specifically. And if I was a teacher, I would be seeing this and be one, maybe a little insecure about my job and be like, is this the process of me like getting replaced?
sure.
What place do I have in this system now? Does a teacher turn from a person that stands in front of a classroom and teaches like a group of 30, 40 kids into somebody that's basically like an AI manager? And
Maybe an emotional support or someone who can handle the human
description
side.
they have is pretty decent. So it's at Alpha School, teachers shift from traditional roles like grading and writing lesson plans to supporting students' emotional and motivational needs and teaching life skills. Just like, yeah, I mean, that's a, very optimistic description, but in theory, like, yeah, and those are the most impactful teachers that I had, is not the ones who wrote really good lesson plans. It's one that like really tailored to
spoke
me.
to you.
Right.
Yeah. I will say I think it's really important for there to still be like guidance and structure from the school, and that because when I was in high school, I had this class I was a part of that was you could get into instead of English, and it was called, this is at a public school too, it was called RISE. I forget what it stood for, but the idea was you had the autonomy within that class to kind of decide whatever you wanted to work on, and the dramatically, I would say, good examples of how that time was used was one girl that graduated a few years before me, worked really hard, opened like a coffee business using the time that she was in that class, and then she got into like an Ivy League school. And there was other examples of people in that class becoming really successful. I think I struggled a bit more in that environment. Like, even though I was a really successful
waste the
student
time?
at
Like,
that
you
age,
just did what-
I fucked off. Like,
Yeah,
I spent like half of
Yeah,
that.
that's what I would've done.
I spent half of that first year like finding YouTube music and learning how to like, I basically spent a bunch of time learning how to pirate music at school because I couldn't do it at the computer at home.
That's alpha right there.
And
It's alpha.
it's not to say that like program didn't have any use, but I feel like that was supposed to be this opportunity for me to grow and succeed in a direction that I couldn't in a normal class. And I think that opportunity is really important, but I could have used a little more guidance.
Yeah, a little more structure, a little
Yeah.
more guidance, especially for some kids. That makes sense.
You know what else could use structure and guidance?
This show?
This show. Let's move on to
Drama!
Guys, it's been
Drama.
almost 43 minutes. I'm sorry, tech bros. We are now moving on to Tesla. Let's talk about Tesla.
It's time for DougDoug to call out Mark Rober.
Yeah, you need to do it. We need first of all, we need an enemy for this podcast.
Yeah.
All good podcasts have enemies.
Okay. It's
you set the stage?
interesting timing, because
Okay.
last week we talked a whole lot about Tesla versus Waymo, which is basically the difference between cameras in a car versus cameras and LiDAR in a car. LiDAR being lasers that shoots around and it can like see what's going on irrespective of whether there's light in the camera or there's fog or whatever else. So 2 days later, I think, Mark Rober, giant science YouTuber, if you don't know, very family friendly, makes this video where he compares Tesla to another company, Luminar, who makes LiDAR. So basically he just does a bunch of tests of this exact thing, of a car,
Timing
Tesla.
was crazy.
Yeah, timing's crazy. Of a car that just does cameras versus a car that has this LiDAR system built in. And so he puts out this video, and somewhat predictably, the Tesla fails several of these things, and the LiDAR system succeeds at all of them. For example, if there's like super bright lights in the car, I forget exactly which ones Tesla failed. It failed like half, but like super bright lights, or rain that is falling from a bunch of hoses that completely obscures the vision, right? And then the last one is he went through a fake cartoon painted wall. So he's like, and if you're looking at the video, you can see it. He drives through a wall that is painted to look like the background. This is not something that happens in real life. But the point of this is like there is a physical object on the road, and the laser LiDAR system absolutely can detect it, but the cameras can't, because the cameras, it just looks like the road is continuing, right? So he did this test, and it's very fun and dramatic. I thought it was interesting, the response to some of this. So this was one of the most prominent criticisms I saw. I don't know who Sawyer Merritt is, although in his bio it says investor of Tesla, so I think he's slightly biased.
Sure.
But there's, you know, the timing of this was so interesting. And he posts this video. Mark Rober posts this video, and then on Monday, Tesla stock drops, and Luminar's stock, who makes the LiDAR that he showed off, increased 25%.
I mean, it's
Oh
a
my
10
God.
million view video.
By-
it's a big.
By two days later, it peaked at a 50% increase. So
Let's see, Mark Rober, why don't you post your Robinhood account?
yeah. So Mark Rober said he followed up, and he had, due to criticism, he was like, we did not receive money from Luminar. But Luminar stock goes way up. What Luminar does, they don't make cars, but they make the LiDAR system that they're trying to sell to cars. So they're trying to make like a standalone LiDAR system. So this guy, Sawyer Merritt, comes in and is voicing some of the big criticisms against this video Mark Rober does. The first up is that he doesn't actually use Tesla's full self-driving technology. He uses autopilot. So autopilot is like every Tesla car basically has this, and it's like a highway driver assist. It just like keeps you in the lanes and whatnot. And it is supposed to brake and stop you from hitting things, but it's not full self-driving. There is, as of the last like 5 years, there's full self-driving SFD that Teslas have, and that's the new thing that is meant to be self-driving. So right out the bat, it's kind of strange. He just straight up didn't use Tesla's advanced system at all. He used the old one from 5 years ago that is not meant for things like this. There's also inconsistencies in the video. So he like posts this clip on YouTube due to criticism of him driving through the wall with the Tesla. The Tesla just smashes through it, but he activates the autopilot mode like 3 seconds before going to the wall, like really late. And that impacts it. Whereas with the LiDAR car, they activate it way down the runway, and there's like tons of time for the car to realize there's a wall there. Not only that, he posts this raw footage and says like, this is the raw footage. That's how you know I didn't fake this. But then in the video, there's a different clip where he activates the autopilot earlier in the runway at a different time. So basically they did multiple takes and then spliced them together in the YouTube video, which is just kind of strange and weird. And there's other things, people, you know, being like, why was there a child that you ran over afterwards? It was, and obviously the answer to that is it's dramatic and fun.
Yeah, it's
I
for
was going to
YouTube.
say,
That's
number
fine.
5 was dumb to include because it's like, it's just kind of funny to
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for the
keep
YouTube video. He's a
kid
good
there.
YouTuber.
Yeah. So it's, I mean,
Okay.
I think the point is like I think Mark Rober's an extremely talented guy, and I don't think this was well-intentioned, but it is, I think, objectively misleading. The video is titled, "Can you trick a self-driving car?" or "Can you fool a self-driving car?" and then does not use Tesla's full self-driving capabilities, and then basically stacks the odds against it and doesn't give a whole lot of clarity around like, hey, we're doing a bunch of tests and we are giving Tesla as many disadvantages as possible. Disclaimer again. I don't love Tesla and Elon Musk. God damn. But I am at least voicing some criticism. And so, you know, this, I would go so far as to say most of the people criticizing this are clearly angry Tesla investors who want to believe the Kool-Aid. You know, I'm not convinced this is some big scandal or whatever, but it was kind of weird and interesting how much of a market impact this video for Mark Rober had, as well as the fact that objectively he gave a lot of disadvantages to Tesla. It's a little weird.
So that was a little bit of my thought. Was you as a YouTuber making this video might not have been paid by the other company, might not necessarily want Tesla to be the party to fail, but if both cars just handle both situations equally fine and you don't put any effort into it past that, you've made a pretty boring YouTube video.
Right.
And I think from an entertainer's perspective, I can understand why he might have made these decisions if the criticisms are accurate.
Right.
And it kind of starts to walk this line of like, how much duty do you as like an entertainer, but also like a science YouTuber that I think commands a lot of respect within the space.
Yes.
He's
He's a NASA engineer, or was a NASA engineer.
Okay.
Like,
I'm going to do my best to defend Mark Rober here, but I do agree that I think the most damning criticism to me is that you should have used full self-driving.
right. That's by
think
far the
that's
biggest.
by
It's
far
like
the most
he
annoying.
literally used the outdated system that is
Because-
not meant to be self-driving and made that his comparison in a video called "Can you
You
fool a
want to
self-driving car?"
test the latest and greatest.
Right.
And I have a Volkswagen that came out a few years ago, and I have this system like that keeps me in the lanes and stops me from hitting cars. You know what I mean? Like, but I wouldn't expect it to succeed in this situation. So I think that's I
But
think
so
that
here's
is
the
fair.
core thing is like, first of all, what his results line up with is essentially equivalent to what you said in your breakdown of LiDAR versus cameras and their different capabilities and different strengths.
Yes.
Including fog and bright lights.
Yes.
And so it is reasonable that if this test were to rerun again, even with FSD, this could still be a problem with
Yes.
LiDAR versus cameras. Like
Yeah.
it needs to be tested again. before-
Most likely, the results would be the same.
Yeah.
But the fact that he disadvantaged
No, it just
Tesla
hurts his point.
unnecessarily,
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
why did you do that? Like now
agree.
there is so much criticism because genuinely it's not fair. Like,
Yeah. And then the only other thing I want to mention is a lot of people are pointing out, like if you see right here, see the rainbow road goes on?
yeah.
He turns it on late for sure, but it's on, turns off. And that is because people are postulating, and I read a good article on this, is that Teslas have been shown in multiple instances to automatically turn off before an accident to change to muddy the waters around whether autopilot was engaged during accidents.
So
Dude, it's
for
like when
reasons.
Disney takes the bodies out of the park
Oh,
before they're declared dead.
Oh, that's good.
I don't know if they this is rumored. This is rumored.
Because if you pause this footage,
Okay. Yes.
when Mark Rober drives through the wall, it's just Mark Rober driving.
Yeah.
Tesla autopilot's off. So fucking checkmate.
That's what I'm saying.
I know. That
but,
works.
Like,
No, he's
that
right.
has been shown. Like there was a Tesla that drove into it was a white truck and it thought it was the Horizon, or it was a blue truck that thought it was Horizon. They drove into it and the person died. But they said autopilot was off at the time. You're laughing a lot at this guy's death, by
it's
the way.
just-
It's really
if I
funny.
was
I'm
a
not
truck-
touching you.
No, if I was a truck driver, I would not paint my truck to look like a Horizon, like some fucking lunatic.
I think it's a bad idea. I
I
agree.
would bait people
I
into killing
agree.
themselves in my truck.
It's probably not the smartest trucker move, but this guy dies, and every time this happens, they kind of muddy the waters. Like autopilot wasn't engaged at the moment of crash, but it was engaged, seconds before. And it if it's too late to brake, but it still detects a collision, it does turn off. And they say it's for the reason of let's give back to the humans. They have last chance, but it feels very muddy the water. So while I agree with you, I really do. I was kind of disappointed because I feel like Mark Rober had a real chance to have an open and shut slam dunk
Yeah.
on LiDAR. And instead, because of these errors, it muddies the water. So no one can. But I also think this points out, this footage is pointing out what a lot of court cases have already shown, which is this is a real thing that Tesla was getting investigated before Doge wiped out a lot of the investigative areas that were looking into this. So I guess-
That's just coincidence.
That's just coincidence.
Oh, allegations.
So I don't know. I'm ambivalent on it. I wish they would do. I mean, he's getting so much pushback. Maybe he will do a follow up or do some kind of more strenuous test or. Maybe,
It's interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting.
I would love to know more detailed, but
There's a whole other topic which I don't know enough about, which is the legal side of full self-driving, which is if a Waymo hits and kills a person, who is at fault? What happens? Do we just put the car in jail, or is it the engineers, or is it what happens, man? So that's a whole
I got
crazy
this
thing.
video recommended after your talk last week. I guess I was just looking more into it, and it's a Waymo that's getting pulled over by a cop on foot, a cop on foot in his full uniform is stop. The Waymo stops, and then a little driverless pizza delivery bot is rolling by, and the guy gets distracted, and then the Waymo just fucking beelines out of there. And it's how do you, he doesn't know what to do. He's an old cop. He has no idea how to deal with all these robots around him just moving on their own. It's just, the world's getting so crazy. Things are changing so fast, though. It's interesting.
That's so funny.
Anyway, what do you think will happen? I don't know what Mark Rober does next. I don't even know if he's upset about it. The video's doing great.
I feel like Mark Rober criticism, the problem is that even if the pushback is really big, it's kind of like when Mr. Beast gets flack, you're pretty insulated. At the core of it, even if 1 million people are shitting on you,
Right.
you drop the next video to 10 million plus people that have no idea this drama even exists.
Right.
And that's Mr. Beast is
That's not
kind
a
of
great
escape.
thing. That's not.
No, I don't think there's a lack of accountability in
Yeah.
that. But Mr. Beast is kind of run to that level, right? Where it's even if the internet, there's a huge pocket of the internet that's beside of him, it's 100 million people still watch the next yacht video.
Right,
or
right,
whatever.
right.
Because they just don't even know that this is a controversy in the first place.
And this is, all things considered, this is pretty niche.
Yeah.
This is not a huge deal,
Sure.
but it is an interesting as this conversation goes on with cars and whether we should have LiDAR in them or if Tesla can pull off this thing. And Tesla is saying right now that they're going to launch cyber cabs in June of this year. That's in 3 months.
In
And there's
2025?
This year, yeah.
This
What?
year. So supposedly in 3 months in Texas, they're going to be launching cars that don't have a driver in them, which is from what we are aware of, way too soon. So this is an ongoing discussion. I think it's going to happen and be very relevant over the next couple of years. Is like, what exactly are our standards as Americans or humans who are near cars to like how good it has to be? You know, it's like, it's going to be so interesting. But
and one more thing I want to say, because you put me on all this, is that, you know, you made the story that Tesla decided early on that LiDAR was too expensive.
yes.
And when they made that decision,
and again, too expensive and also technically not the best solution.
sure, like cameras just focusing on that.
Right.
Yeah,
It's both, which is important to recognize. But yes.
But when they said that, my understanding is that LiDAR was like as expensive as up to $15,000 of additional shit you got to put on the car.
Yes.
And now at the time of Luminar and all this stuff, the cost is going down to like $500 to $1,000. Like it's dropped dramatically.
It's that cheap?
Yes.
It's gotten way cheaper.
It used to be tens of thousands, and now it's hundreds is the estimates.
Wait.
And so in the future, you can imagine it getting insanely, you know, if that continues, we get it down to
Even if it was at that price, like if that's the price that it takes to
be
add
that
on to a
safe?
system to be that safe, then
Well, think of the
how is
shareholders.
that?
He's making a good point. Wait, as a business major, I'm actually switching right back to Doug.
Yeah.
I mean,
on my side.
but it feels like a needless cost cut when it's getting this cheap.
Sure.
I think the LiDAR stands are
LiDAR
starting to-
stands.
the LiDAR stands are starting to make waves. I don't know. It feels you're
Yes,
having a moment.
it's worth reiterating because I think a lot of people miss this point, is
Yeah.
that it's not just cost. It is the bigger argument is that having your engineering team focused on just a vision approach is going to allow you to do it more effectively than to spread them out across a bunch of tech that has to coordinate. That is incredibly hard to do. So it's not like you just stick LiDAR and you got +1 stats in your car. Like it becomes much
I
more
understand
complex.
that.
So,
That's good.
and so I just want to, So I want to reiterate that. Like even if LiDAR
That's
costs,
Doug as my AI tutor trying to make it like
yeah.
This is good. Maybe I didn't understand this, and then I wanted to stick LiDAR on like my Honda Civic, and it drives itself now. I just paid the
It
$500.
just works. I put LiDAR on there.
$500.
As far as I can tell, if LiDAR cost $1, Elon would not put them in Teslas because he thinks the better approach to actually achieving full self-driving is to have a simpler vision-based approach that you just get that way. Again, he says it's a software problem, not a hardware problem. That's it. That's the thinking. That's the thinking.
One more thing, anti-LiDAR thing I want to say. This is my most pro-Elon argument yet, is I read that one downside of LiDAR is that if everybody has LiDAR, they interfere with each other. So if every car on the road was using LiDAR, the amount of laser, I mean, that sounds so boomer, I don't know. The amount of lasers out there might
many
interrupt
lasers.
the data collection or cause problems. Again, I don't know if this is true, but my understanding is that LiDAR could be conflicting if there was like everyone doing it at all times. We'd have to look more into this, but that could be a problem down the road where we go, oh, LiDAR's great, and then it causes its own issues.
But then all the cars are crashing all the time.
That'd be kind of cool though, like Fast and the
Do
Furious.
you think we could ship all of the LiDAR lasers using a fleet from the Jones Act?
Oh my God!
which was created
He's the
after World
transition
War
goal.
I
Well
to
done.
help preserve shipping lanes in the
done.
United
Oh,
States.
I didn't know we were dealing with a
That's
professional
the thing
here.
about the Jones Act, Doug. We wouldn't. We
What?
choose not to do it because of the
What is
Jones
the
Act.
coincidence?
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
I like it. Us not getting into this so we can have something that me and you know. But he
Yeah,
doesn't.
like a little
You guys
secret.
just keep
Yeah.
referencing around it, like the Jones Act. And you're
Oh, the
smiling.
Jones Act.
for this
Classic
section,
Jones Act.
Put on,
baby.
you put on earmuffs. I don't think you deserve this.
Teach me about the Jones Act, AI
Well,
tutor. Teach me.
Your AI tutor is loading his Jones Act. I
Okay.
thought this would be interesting to talk about because I've heard about this law coming up in a bunch of videos explaining shipping logistics in like different parts of the U.S. So I watched a video about like, how Hawaii handles their like shipping between islands or from the mainland, and then a video about basically the decline of Puerto Rico and how the Jones Act affects Puerto Rico. And then I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I think at a time when like tariffs especially, but I would say protectionism in general is a big talking point of the Trump administration, fans of Trump. Like the
USA.
idea that we're isolating as Americans and becoming better independently and we don't need to rely on this like global economic system anymore, things like that. So the Jones Act it started in 1920, was put in place in 1920 in the wake of World War I.
Okay.
The Jones Act is a law that requires any like water-based shipping, so even on a river, to be done by a ship that was built in the US, owned by a US company, and crewed only by Americans.
USA. You.
Very,
my
very
country
pro
back.
USA law. And the idea was in the wake of World War I.
Sorry, any ship that's delivering to America, or what do you mean?
Any ship there, so any ship that is delivering goods between American ports.
Okay, yeah, I was like, because China wouldn't send a ship here with. Okay, so any
Well,
American to America.
So the way this law, an example of how this law affects things now is, say there's a Chinese shipping company, right?
Yeah.
And they have a boat that they built in Korea.
Okay.
And that boat picks some stuff up in Long Beach, and it is not allowed to pick up stuff in Long Beach and then bring it to Seattle. That's illegal.
Nowhere else in America.
Nowhere else in America.
Can they make a round trip to Cuba and stop there and then?
Okay, so that's the weird thing is yes, technically, if they interrupt the trip by going somewhere else first, they can then
they just
go
do that probably
to
all the
America.
time?
No, but they don't, because there's not a ton of like use cases where that is super effective.
Okay.
There's a similar law that applies to passenger boats, and they do that.
Okay.
So that's why all the ferries that go from like Washington to Alaska stop in Vancouver. All of them.
Just a
They have to.
So
the
they have to
Jones
like
Act.
ping pong between countries.
Because they're not on Jones Act compliant ships.
That's so funny.
So basically the idea was, if we put this protectionist law into place, the US will always have a thriving like maritime shipping industry that is not only good for America on the whole, but is good for like military and like security reasons. So when we get into a big naval war, we have like a shipping fleet to deploy.
Okay.
But what they didn't plan for is
and there
that
were no downsides.
there were
it's
were no
worked.
downsides, and that
End of
think
the
there were no
our
episode.
thriving American shipping industry. The problem we've arrived at is they didn't expect global shipping to like blow up as much as it did in the
Okay.
future after the fact, and
I love his cute little notebook.
Yeah.
They make fun of him on the yard
Thing
so
in the
much when they
For the
watch this.
notebook?
Yeah, because they never seen him like this, so they watch this show and they're like, he's got his little notebook. Usually he's talking about piss and shit and farting.
piss and shit
I
and
like the idea
common.
that the yard
Piss
just
and shit and
becomes this
cum.
like Mystery Science Theater. They're just watching our show, making fun of Aiden the whole time.
That's all they do. But ships started getting built in other places outside of the U.S. because it was way more cost effective to do that.
Yeah, I mean, can I
and-
say a stat?
Yeah.
55% of all shipbuilding globally is done in China.
Yeah,
No.
God.
and dude, get this. In as of 2018, and this was the trajectory was still going up.
Yeah.
91% of shipbuilding happens in China, Korea, and Japan. So the entire shipyard industry, like ship manufacturing industry in the U.S., it just doesn't exist anymore. All of these companies went out of business, and they don't have enough Jones Act compliant clients to like keep a business open.
Well, there's not enough demand
there's-
from that.
So it was funny because when I was reading through this, there was like the paper that I was reading was from 2020, and it was talking about how few shipyards are left in the U.S. that even make these types of ships anymore. And it was like, and one of the few remaining ones is about to close. It's called like the Philly shipyard. So I looked up this shipyard. The name of that shipyard now, the Hanwha Philly Shipyard.
A true American institution.
In 2024, it had
Don't
been
talk shit about
been-
Philly, the Eagles, or Hanwha Shipping.
It had been bought by a South Korean company.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's a South Korean
yeah,
company.
yeah.
So isn't it? That's. It was really funny to like. Oh, that happened. It got bought out. And the consequences of this, in short, are that we have a really limited supply of compliant boats that are even able to fulfill this purpose anymore. They're more expensive to use. So for any goods that like Hawaii has to get, for example, or coastal states in general, the price of goods shipped on those things is like really, really expensive because there's only a couple companies that even do this type of shipping. So there's way lower supply. They're way less efficient,
Right.
and they charge way more because they basically have
monopoly.
monopolies on
Yeah.
the
Yeah, there's
industry.
no competition. Yeah.
And this grand like shipyard industry that was meant to produce, like having this giant fleet and all these companies like protected, actually has crumbled and fallen apart. And the people that suffer the most are like a really explicit example is the Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico and like devastated Puerto Rico a couple years ago, right?
And they were turning around ships for the Jones Act?
And that was a big thing is like they couldn't get emergency supplies because the Jones Act affects those ships. And they had to, they were requesting to like lift the law for a period. And Trump eventually caved and lifted it for a week. But he said, basically, the companies that benefit from this like really don't want us to do this. That's like, and during Hurricane Katrina, they did the same thing. It's like this law is so harmful that during disasters, they literally temporarily remove it.
Right.
Because
Otherwise,
of the
a few
effects that it
companies
has.
will surcharge. Yeah.
But even like day to day, like things like fuel, supplies are either way more expensive or less accessible. Or these places turn to maybe foreign countries instead because they can offer those goods at a way lower price. So you're losing like the economic benefit from that.
Yeah.
And then also anything that you would ship over water that might be cheaper normally gets pushed into like other transportation industries in the US that are like further burdened. Like the supply of shipping space in the US brought to you by like things like trucks, trains,
or whatever. I
etc.
see, yeah.
is stretched thinner
Okay.
because the boats aren't really an option.
So I see two options. One is we as a podcast advocate for the repeal of the Jones Act, which would be pretty cool of us. We do like a really powerful.
Yeah.
Or two, we start an American-owned shipping company.
Oh,
Take advantage of this monopoly situation.
that's what our Patreon tier is. You get to ride on our boat.
You get to be the crew on the boat.
As long as you're an American citizen.
long as you're
or
American.
You have to pretend to be. We'll give you an American flag shirt.
They pay us to work on the
Us to
boat.
work on
so
the
we
boat.
can undercut the current monopoly. This is big.
Why didn't any of the
This is
boat companies think about this?
Like think about this. Think about our plan.
Right.
Because
Right.
Why didn't
it's
they make a
if the
podcast?
boat companies,
They don't have
if the boat
Patreon.
companies had just opened a Patreon
Yeah.
and asked people to work for them.
They could have made some real money.
But the reason that I was thinking about this a lot and why I thought it was interesting is because while the benefactors of this would be the remaining people that get
To work
to
on ships in the US.
work on a ship in the US and keep your job. Because honestly, if foreign companies were competing, the remaining shipping jobs that exist here, albeit very few, wouldn't exist at all because they'd be getting outcompeted by who actually staffs ships now, which is like Filipino and like Indian
Right.
workers who are much cheaper to pay.
Right.
And the boats cost way less.
And the boats cost way less
like
to
half
make.
or a third of the price or something
I
to
think-
make a boat in China or Korea
For better
versus-
quality.
Yes, it's like we just have
We are actually
old,
just behind on- we have
shitty,
old shitty
expensive
ships.
boats
Yeah.
that you then have to use to move something from Puerto Rico to Florida.
Yeah,
Like,
we have to.
Yeah.
And the new and an example of like an industry that basically existed way smaller scale back then is like natural gas. They get moved around on big tanker boats. American tanker boats do not exist. There are none. Literally doesn't exist. So a place like Puerto Rico that might be able to get like natural gas, which we produce. I don't know if you know this. We've been drilling.
I do know this.
We've been drilling.
We're kind of a natural gas goats.
a
and
lot
you
of
can-
W's for America.
You
in
can
this
send
pod.
American gas to Puerto Rico at like a really cheap rate, but because this law exists, that you can't do that. And then a lot of that excess gas would get sold to like other countries, and then Puerto Rico's buying their gas from other countries.
Dude, there's so much of that happening. There's so much of like, we put like a restriction on buying Russian oil or something, and then Russian oil just goes to India and then goes from India to, like if Europe restricts it, they just go to India and then sell it to Europe.
The circumvention of tariffs is so
insane.
interesting.
Or like Vietnam is like thriving because it is not China, but you can just put something from China to Vietnam, slap a sticker on it, and then sell. Like there's all these ways of getting around tariffs and protectionism, and it's okay. So with all this being said, I think we can agree this rule's not working. But I personally think that America having some sort of shipbuilding industry is valuable, especially in a world where, they're at tensions with China. Having all of it there is kind of spooky in that world. So do you have any thoughts of like what you would do could you solve this problem for everyone?
If I could just solve this quickly right now, this like huge geopolitical issue. Well, that's the thing, right? Is like this law actually has nothing to do.
It's
It
not
didn't
working.
protect that
It
at all.
didn't protect it. It didn't work.
And so we're in a worse spot.
Yeah, this
like,
makes no sense. Like,
compared
this has
to
not done anything.
even back then. I don't really have the answer. Like you'd have to like.
thought he would.
Why do I listen to this show?
If we're not going to solve the shipbuilding crisis in America, then why are they tuning in, Aiden?
The only thing I can think of is
Put it on the Patreon.
you would have to
The solution
is right on the
Patreon.
Trump, if you're
Patreon.
watching, the solution is on the Patreon. You have to do the tier 3.
We'll tell one person on our boat.
Yeah, one lucky tier 3 subscriber who works on the boat,
Whisper it to
and we'll whisper it to them as we send them off into open water. I think I would love to hear a better approach or answer. The only thing I can think of is stuff similar to like the CHIPS Act, right? Like you have to subsidize and like basically invest and spend a bunch of money to making a ship in the US cheap enough to make it competitive. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, and then
from what I know.
Yeah,
From
and
what
my
I know.
understanding is arguably it's like, so this is what we're doing instead of the government subsidizing a shipping industry is we force Americans to pay more to get their stuff shipped. And particularly like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Alaska, just have to pay way more for all their shit because it has to be shipped on these boats that are old and expensive, and there's not very many of them.
Terrible.
And so the biggest advocates to repealing the Jones Act are Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Alaska, anybody who doesn't live in the contiguous United States, because you just have to pay way more. So arguably, instead of our government subsidizing our shipping fleet, it's Puerto Ricans like subsidizing our
essentially
shipping fleet and just paying.
taxing these 3 states
Right.
to give the money to small dying shipping
Right.
companies in America.
Right, like it is ridiculous.
which are like price gouging and
yeah.
When you put it that way, it's kind of basic.
Like we have
Actually,
Hawaii as like a very important state that everybody loves, and then we're just like, yeah, but we're gonna make it super expensive for you guys to get anything. It's like it's wild. I would lean more towards just straight up government subsidies because I just don't think it makes sense. And I know free markets have downside, but like in this case, I would rather
it's
our shipyards have to compete and we have a smaller amount that are actually good rather than what we have, which is a bunch of expensive, slow, shitty fleets, and then everybody's paying more for stuff. I just don't see how this benefits.
There's a funny story about Hawaiian farmers choosing to air in cows to the mainland instead of using boats because of this law.
Dude. That's
what
like a Far
the
Side
Wright
cartoon.
brothers-
There's 3 cows
I
in
know.
first class.
That's what the Wright brothers were imagining. They're like, finally, Hawaiians can get their cows easily to California.
Yeah, it's
That's
not like
wild.
it's not like it's all roses on the other side of this. Is like, okay, well, what happens when you let like full competition take place? It's like, you know, there's a bunch of scrutiny of the quality of work conditions on boats and the low wages you get to pay these people from the Philippines and India that often staff these boats. Like, it's not like the other side is like filled with good. It's just that there's a bunch of people in the US, particularly in those places, that suffer because of this decision.
Yeah.
And the only people that benefit are the people who have the monopolies on the remaining shipping left and like the people who have jobs at those shipping companies. And at the individual level, I'm sure they would like to keep their jobs. It's kind of what did we didn't talk about this on an episode, but we did talk about this together. Was the efficiency of ports in the US versus like the efficiency.
Oh, we did that.
Right.
This. That was one
abroad.
of our first conversations where we were like thinking about this doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's you know, there was a big, it was when we were at the dinner, like where we were talking about like what we wanted the show to be. And I thought that conversation is very similar. It's like, obviously people want to keep their jobs and do not want to suffer in the wake of a decision that would like repeal this law, right? But how many people are suffering on the other end because this
the
law
aggregate
exists?
other side, for sure.
I think it's like, I don't know the number. I believe it's like either 100,000, between 100,000 and like a couple 100,000 people are employed by the Jones Act shipping stuff. So it's like you lose that. And that's not insignificant.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
But then, you know, again, the other side of the coin is there are millions and millions and millions of people in the United States in various areas who are paying way more, basically so that those people have jobs. And it's like, is that, dude, the other thing that I would be more stoked about repealing the Jones Act if Trump was not burning all of the bridges with Japan and Korea, who are the only ones who could make our ships if we go to war with China. You know, it's like, I generally am all about free market, but then when you also burn the bridges to the rest of the market, then it's like,
you have to be able to make it yourself.
Right, like,
or
it's-
you
just-
can't do both.
I mean, that's one thing I've read about a little bit, which is bigger conversation. But like, if we go to war, as far as my understanding, like America is completely porked right now. Like we can't build ships, we can't build most of our stuff. All the raw materials comes from other countries. So like we just would not be able to build things. And then I don't know if that helps or hurts that if we repeal the Jones Act and then there's more competition. I don't know, man. It's a little
I
dire.
think regardless, hopefully there's no war with China, right? But regardless of that, I think this Jones Act
actually
is
pro.
not doing what it was intended to do, which is protect American shipbuilding.
I'm actually pro. I think we should just
You're
get
trying to
into
get it over with.
It's the villain
Fuck
seat.
it. Okay,
Drop
Yeah,
in
but
the
you
comment.
hate Xi Jinping. You always are talking shit on my man Xi.
He's in.
He's the GOAT.
No, we're buds. Have you seen my Discord profile picture right
Dude,
now?
Do you see this?
Yeah,
He
you're
changed his
with
profile to like
Xi
a
Jinping.
It's
communist
me and
flag
Xi-
with Xi
somebody like drew me hanging out with Xi Jinping
Wow.
with the yard and Chinese flag waving below us and F-35s flying above us.
I know what's happening. He's a sleeper agent from China here to destroy our shipbuilding industry
knew it.
with this
Good,
fake
honest
propaganda about
American
the
ships.
The law is so bad. So
No, yeah,
it's
it's
so
all written in
bad. You
Chinese.
should-
It's all written in Chinese.
Comes in here
That'd
with
be
this.
so much,
So
so
badass.
sick. I open up my next notepad.
It's all Mandarin.
just all-
Comes in with your
so
little
tight.
white book trying to
Yeah,
spread your lies to the
yeah.
youth.
But yeah, I just thought it's one thing it was making me think of as a final note, and I would love to hear if people in the audience have like more thoughts about this too. Is this something that had, I think, obviously good intentions fell apart because of like other factors outside of the law that it could not control, and then the complete purpose of the law was like totally
Subverted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if there's, when you look at protectionist legislation in the future, what are the little loopholes and potential consequences of that? So I don't know. It was interesting.
Doug, you had some drama. You had 2 drama this
Hey,
episode.
we can end this on some juicy ass drama.
Yeah, let me hear this drama.
Okay.
'Cause I don't know what this topic is.
I have got juicy drama in the world. Dun dun. Of HR SaaS companies.
This is not juicy drama.
This is juicy. This is juicy. Guys, buckle in.
HR software as a service.
Right.
Like
Yeah, like
Adobe subscriptions?
No, like they help with payroll.
Like, yeah, it's like you get
Wait,
payroll.
he's actually got me hooked.
Okay, all right. Aiden's
He's
in.
actually
Aiden's
got
in.
me hooked.
Put on your earmuffs. Put on your earmuffs.
I have to browse
Aiden's-
that shit.
Aiden's gonna know about all the HR drama, and you're not,
Yes,
dude.
sir.
You're gonna wonder.
I'm
And we're
actually
gonna talk
sir.
about
This is my left out
Sign
episode.
me
I'm the
up.
monkey in the middle.
What did Gusto do this time?
Oh, okay. All right. This is all, I swear this is all real. I'm not exaggerating. Okay. There's a bunch of HR companies. You got Workday, right? Everybody loves Workday. They all hate it. But
They hate it.
Any major company has some sort of HR software. It helps with like employees and contracting and payroll and all this other stuff, right? All this like not very fun stuff, but there's a huge business.
Okay.
The 2 of the newer players are Rippling and Deal. Deal is spelled D-E-E-L. So Deal. So these 2, they're both growing really rapidly. They kind of specialize a little bit in one thing versus the other, but for the most part, it's like, here's all the HR tools you need for your business. They're evaluated most recently, this is like 2 years ago, at 12 billion and 13 billion. They're like
Dead heat.
neck and
Wow.
neck.
Okay.
And they're like ultra competitive.
Okay.
Okay. And so you might think, yeah, who cares? That's not very interesting. They start beefing. Okay. They start to like pretty aggressively pursue each other's customers, right? Because they go for businesses, and so they're like, they go, Nike is, I think, with Deal. So Rippling goes, it's like, hey, you should come over to Rippling. We have a better business, all this stuff. And so at some point recently, Deal, and I have it up here. Oh, we'll accept all the cookies. Deal, one of the 2 services, they post something called Deal versus Rippling.
This is on their website?
This is on their website. And
Oh, so
so they
direct.
This is kind of raw.
Right,
It's like
right,
if
right.
you went to Coke's
It's-
website and it was
it was
just
like-
Coke versus
Yeah.
Pepsi.
Them pouring a Pepsi in the trash.
Yeah, that'd be
Guys, trust me, this
Okay.
is the least dramatic
Okay,
it gets.
okay, okay. I'm
So
excited,
this
I'm
is
excited.
the start. Deal, the HR company posts Deal versus Rippling. And they're like, we have all these entities, integrations, payment methods. Get started. Here's the companies. Deal is rated higher than Rippling in 74% of the shared markets. It's just this straight up, hey, here's
like,
a
you
comparison.
suck, we're great.
This is so funny. It's like the comparing product graph.
It's a comparing of like their 2 subscriptions, except it's their company checking every box and Rippling failing over and over and over. It's like automate IT operations. X. No,
It's
they
kind
can't
of
do
like a Mark Rober video, though, right?
yeah, right.
Set up to.
All right,
When's that
so
gonna
Deal
succeed?
throws out a punch, right? And so Rippling strikes back. How do you think Rippling would reply? You might think they'll make their own page. No. What Rippling did is they introduce a snake game. And so they make an actual game of Snake where you move around and you have to get little items, right? And they say, don't buy snake oil. Deal claims to be the one-stop solution for your global payroll needs, but their customers pay the price. Play this game to find out the difference. And then as you play this Snake game,
Okay.
I don't know if I can play it on this iPad here, but it shows a claim. Oh, I can. It shows a claim from Deal. And then when you go and you get it, it shows you the actual thing that they said. Deal's marketing claim, pay anyone, anywhere in minutes. Reality could take days to run global payroll.
That's brutal. Beef.
As you play the Snake game, each one unlocks a letter for the word mislead. At one point, somebody from Rippling posts a screenshot. One of the executives from Deal played the game and sent in feedback, which is suck a dick with a big dick ASCII art. So they're now full on beefing. They were always competitors in the market. Now they're just
that's-
full on
That's
making these
real.
insane things.
This is the Kendrick versus Drake of like
Of
business-
payroll
of-
services?
Of payroll
Yeah,
services.
except they're both.
Of guys wearing a Patagonia vest in their
This is awesome.
Yeah, so it's getting pretty intense, right? And you're like, all right, this is funny. And then on Monday, 2 days ago, the CEO of Rippling releases a tweet, and he says, today, Rippling sued Deal. What? Our lawsuit alleges that Deal cultivated a spy at
Oh,
Rippling
shit.
and orchestrated a long-running trade secret theft. Okay, so let me break down what exactly goes on in this very detailed lawsuit where they break down what happened. They, turns out, at Rippling, use Slack, and they have logs for everything somebody does on Slack, including which channels they search for and look at. And they find out that there's they think, a spy and a new employee who
Holy
keeps
shit.
searching in Slack for Deal stuff. So he joins Rippling, and he just starts searching in every single channel for anything related to Deal and any customers that Deal has, and searching for, like, customers that Rippling is trying to get from Deal.
So he could leak
So
the
he could leak
info
it, right?
back and they can stop
And so
it.
they're like, we think we have a spy. This employee, it has nothing to do with his job, but he keeps looking into what Deal is doing. Okay, so so they're like, we want to see if this guy is actually a spy. And so they honeypot him, and they make a fake Slack channel called it's like D Defectors. Yeah, D Defectors. They make a new Slack channel that didn't exist, and they send a letter to Deal's chairman, CFO, and general counsel that says, hey guys, just so you know, Deal, us at Rippling, we have a new Slack channel where we talk about all the stuff we have on you. And if you ever mess with us again, we're going to release all of it. Literally just honeypot. Make this up, right? Within 4 hours, the alleged spy is now searching for this new channel, which was made specifically for this. So the honeypot works. This guy who is maybe a spy immediately starts searching for this new channel that has not existed a day
they
before.
caught
And it's
him.
all made up. Okay. It gets better. They go to the High Court of Ireland and they get a court order that they're going to go take his phone. They show up to his desk with a court examiner, like a court-appointed person who is legally authorized to detain this guy. And he runs into the bathroom and locks the door and tries to flush the phone down the toilet.
Dude, holy.
So the guy is banging on the door saying, you are violating court orders. You have to come out right now. He refuses to respond. After a while, he finally comes out, and you can see here the quote. He says, if you take another step, you're violating court order again. And he says, I'm willing to take that risk. And then he flees the premises.
That's crazy.
So the spy got away. And he took his phone with him. So they didn't get the phone. They even, in the lawsuit, they're like, we looked through our plumbing system and did not find a phone. So they went and looked for it. Okay, so this is insane. I told you, the most dramatic thing. And the response from Deal is
fucking crazy.
right. This is HR companies. And so Deal's response so far, this is 2 days ago, said weeks after, okay, so they try to go back on the offensive. And this is basically the end, but weeks after Rippling is accused of violating sanctions laws in Russia and seeding falsehoods about Deal, Rippling is trying to shift the narrative away. We deny all legal wrongdoing. And so they're like, oh yeah, Rippling? Well, you guys are selling to the Russians. And then it follows up in one of the articles. However, Deal itself has also been accused of violating sanctions against Russia, according to a lawsuit filed in Florida earlier this year. So both of them are accused of violating sanctions in Russia, which they're using to distract from the spy, which has been stealing trade secrets from Rippling. It is insane.
It is 50 times funnier than its HR software as a service.
It's
so
the most boring,
boring
industry
yeah.
with the most
The
scandalous
highest
shit going on.
stakes.
Oh,
Maybe
That's fucking awesome.
shouldn't have made fun of Gusto before this.
They're
They're doing fine.
They've got
They're
Hitman.
doing fine. Who do you think? Who do you think blew up Nord Stream?
Deal, probably.
the deal spy.
Probably to put to cover up a different thing.
God, I can't wait to follow up. Is the spy
Dude,
going to
you
get
gotta
arrested?
follow-
Is he
I
on the
know.
lam? Like,
Dude,
is he
I gotta
running?
be honest with you.
That's
If
what I
you're
was
Deal and you hire a spy, this guy is the GOAT. This guy really didn't crack under pressure.
I know. He ran. He tried to flush his toilet and then ran away and said, "I'm willing to go to jail for
That's
this."
wild.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was like, surely your job at the HR company is not worth all this. It just can't be.
Right.
Like,
How
you're
much
not-
is Deal paying him?
It's like you're not fighting for like the security of your countrymen. There's
There's real life spies who've cracked easier.
exactly. There's no like nationalism, like or security at stake or something. It's for payroll.
Men used to go to war. Now they fight for HR companies, right? We need something to galvanize our youth because they're just going to do this instead. They're going to scroll on their phones and they're going to go be a spy for Deal. The funniest thing about this to me is that they sent this letter, this honeypot letter to Deal's. It's
Dude,
like
the honeypot is brilliant. That's a smart.
The honeypot's insane. They sent this to only the top people at Deal. So this one of the top people
This
at
is a senior person
at a $12 billion HR company is
a
personally
spy.
orchestrating a spy in their competitor and telling them, "Hey, we just got info about the D-Defectors channel.
Go check
Get
out
us the info."
D-Defectors.
Fucking crazy.
Oh,
Do you think the Yard will figure out who our spy is in their Discord?
What?
No, nothing. I hope they don't murder and kill our spy because they figured it out. It would be like a huge fail.
Okay. Is it realized?
I'm gonna get you and I are gonna get a letter. The Yard has found some incriminating evidence against lemonade stands.
How did you find this story?
Yeah, where did you hear about this? Was
I
this
mean,
Twitter?
it's Twitter.
Man, this is
That's where
wild.
the hot stuff
And
happens.
that's
That was a
why it's
great-
the everything app, man.
Yeah,
See,
it really
everything
does have
on
everything.
there.
You can go to Mars from watching basketball. You can
It's
learn,
really,
you can learn
it's
about
really
lawsuits.
covering all the bases right now. Do you guys? I figured it might be nice to close out on a couple, like, we wanted to follow up on a couple topics from the previous videos, or just a
Let's
few
do it.
quick,
Yeah, that'd be great.
quick
Just a quick
things.
check out the comments. And I think it's worth saying that I think all of us have spent a lot of times reading some of these great comments people put in the last 2 episodes.
Yeah.
We've been responding and sending them in there, and it's been great. I think we super appreciate it. That was like number one thing we were looking for this show is like well thought out, interesting perspectives and thoughts. You'll have it on this one, I'm sure. And it's cool.
I think
You've
from
got a
the
couple.
first episode, because
Yeah.
we even touched on it again in this one, was the people dealing with the consequences of going through the education system during COVID.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think that was probably the thing we got the most personal responses and anecdotes about it. And I would say the pervasive sentiment is basically negative. People talking about their experience, and a lot of people saying things like this. The conversation on socializing post-COVID really resonated with me because I was a junior in high school in 2020 and can definitely attest that it altered my abilities and desires to socialize. I was already really introverted, and instead of trying to fight against the isolation, I basically took advantage of it as a way to get used to not needing peers around me. I know now that this was probably a mistake, and I'm paying the price in my social life for it now that I'm in college. I don't know anyone who also went through the hyper-isolationist route as I did, but I'm sure they're out there. And from reading the comments, I think that experience was very, very similar between people. A lot of people kind of maybe not even necessarily having the worst time during COVID, but then coming out of it and then trying to get back to normal, and then
actively
realizing that
normal.
everything is
Ironically,
fucked
the
up.
isolationists, there might be the most amount of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the most there's ever been. And but I really appreciate it because we got a lot of personal stories that I read through related to that topic, and a lot of stories really similar to that one. The one thing I wanted to follow up about from the last episode was on when we were talking about self-driving cars and the potential of robo taxis, and also the idealistic structure of cities with trains and things like that.
Yeah.
A few people came out and said that we're just a bunch of city guys And we don't get it. And our public transport utopia and the fact that we like trains, like I think we're generally in favor of like, oh, trains are nice to have in cities and a good way to get around. Seem to think that we don't think cars should exist in rural America. And that was actually a surprising amount of comments. I wanted to clarify something because I thought it was a good demonstration of what I call good faith versus bad faith arguments. And
Oh shit.
Okay, all right.
and
I didn't know we were going. Okay,
I knew we were going there.
yeah, I'm buckling in. Yeah.
But
Okay,
I think
all right.
it's a really
Gear
simple
up.
example of like, I think people jump to the conclusion that because I want like more trains and less
That's the
cars in
waffles pancakes
cities.
thing. Have you heard that?
No.
If
What's
you say
that?
I like pancakes, someone on Twitter will say we fucking have against waffles.
Exactly.
What do you hate about waffles?
Exactly. This is what bad faith is when you are listening to us explain a topic or like talk about something and we miss an aspect of the conversation. Like something doesn't get touched on and you assume that because it wasn't touched on, that we disagree with it, that we inherently have the opposition opinion to you.
Well, just to clarify, I do want to take your car away. If you live in a rural part of America, I would like you to ride a horse because that's my image of like a cool rural area.
And that's
is like
you should have horses in rural America.
That's mine. So okay.
And I think you should, like, if I get something wrong, give us the benefit of the doubt. Assume I'm right.
Just assume that you have it wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just some basic common decency.
Fine, just believe Doug.
Just believe
Take
Doug,
it at
'cause
face
he's got a
value.
microphone.
Believe all
Shut
ducks.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's a microphone.
I mean,
Yeah, I have more subscribers than you. Like,
And there's a reason.
that's why I listen to you.
right.
There's a reason.
Right. That's truth. Okay.
Yeah.
There was also obviously a lot of people. There was the comments weren't as frequent as I thought, but the people we were making fun of that were going to be like, Doug's such a Tesla shill. Like
Yeah.
there was a couple people like that.
I
And I was
replied to
like,
a few,
and
but I
it
was
was
pissed.
always like a flag of like, you didn't make it to the part of the episode. One, you tuned out at the beginning of the episode.
Dude.
But two, you just ignored the part, the bombshell you saved where you're like, and I sold all my Tesla stock today
Yeah.
because I don't believe this.
I can I say this one more time? I said this on my stream and I said this in the comments. I responded to some people that said this. When you're taking the position of like trying to find some defense of what Tesla's doing, it's the harder one for the audience that we're going to
Right.
attract and have.
Right.
Yeah.
It's harder to do. It's very easy to be the guy that's like, hey, Tesla sucks. You know, and everyone's like, yeah.
Yeah, it is actually
Yeah.
easier to condemn the guy who did the Nazi
Yeah,
salute.
it's like not hard.
It actually is easier.
And we don't even know what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it makes for a much better podcast to have people having differing opinions.
Yeah.
And
You know what? My heart
Yeah.
goes out to all the people in chat who I like. I think we should strive to have a couple like uninformed, loud people.
Yeah.
You know, that brings life
I'm
to the comment
proud.
section. Yeah.
I actually thought a good litmus test for this is if you've made it this far in the episode, when you have a comment you want to make, put 2 asterisks just at the end of your comment, whatever it is, and it's just a sign that you heard this part of the episode.
Stupid. That's
I just want to
You're
see.
trying to do the deal thing.
I
You're
just wanna
trying to
see.
honeypot the
No,
comments.
no. I just want to see. I just want to see. This one time, I won't ask for it again. But
Okay.
that conversation came up a lot, and I thought I'd clarify is like I don't know if I've ever met anybody in my entire life that has said let's get rid of all the cars in like rural America and
Guilty.
suburbia. Like legitimately has that opinion.
No, I don't know either.
And I was like, so why would that be ours? And you know, the idealistic form of these things, I think, is like, okay, well, you have a really good public transportation system that lets people basically choose to have a car or not if they really want one.
Right.
Because I think the way cities are structured now, like in LA,
have no choice.
In LA, you basically have
You
no
have no
choice.
choice in LA.
In practice, like it's not literally a tax, but it is a tax on every person because you have no choice. You have to pay for your car, pay for your maintenance, pay for your insurance, and those are expenses that I guess freedom. I don't know, the freedom of choice is giving you. Like it's not really a choice at all.
Right.
And the idea is like providing city infrastructure that frees up people from that decision.
And on that note, I'd like you to leave your angriest comment you can as we wrap up episode
But
3
put
of
3
Elimination.
hashtags before it if you got this far in the video.
But the secret 3 hashtag.
Right,
but
yeah.
the people who just clicked out and made their comment right after I
we
said
caught
that.
them.
If you're a 3
Yeah,
hashtagger,
yeah.
you can go reply to the 2 asteriskers, and you can be like, you aren't
You're
committed
not
at
even
all.
a real
You're
viewer.
weak. You're
if
weak.
if you're a 3 hashtagger, first dibs on the Jones Act boats.
Yeah,
you just get the
vote with
spot.
you.
Come out.
All right. Oh, is that the last one?
I think so.
That's pretty
So
much
to
it.
close it out, I did actually bring Atrioc a lemon this time.
no,
he will
it's
eat
not
the
for
entire
me. I thought
thing.
you were going to eat this whole time.
That's I've been telling my stream that you're going to eat it in
no,
one bite.
but you've been saying off camera that it's going to be you. I also bit the styrofoam one. I'll split it with you.
All right. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. It was a great episode. See you next time.
Oh.
It's just,
Oh no.
it just can't be pleasant.
No, I don't
Get
want.
your app. Get your
I'm
app.
okay. Actually, I'm not hungry. That's gross, Doug. Are your eyes watering? Good episode, boys.